Rocky was a gorgeous dog, a little ball of joy with bright, expressive eyes, and a coat that gleamed under the light. His tail never stopped wagging, and his boundless enthusiasm made him impossible to ignore. At just 4 years old, he was bursting with energy, always eager to play, and more than happy to shower anyone he met with affection. His cheerful barks and lively nature made him a favorite among the shelter staff, who adored his playful spirit and friendly demeanor. But despite all his wonderful qualities, there was one thing that baffled everyone at the shelter. Rocky just couldn't seem to keep a home. He had been adopted not once, not twice, but an astonishing 7 times. Each time, a seemingly loving family took him in, excited to give him the forever home he deserved. Yet within just a few weeks, he would be brought back, leaving the shelter. Staff both confused and heartbroken. The strangest part? The reasons given were all over the place. One family claimed he was too energetic, while another insisted he was too lazy and refused to go for walks. Some said he was overly affectionate, always demanding attention, while others complained that he wasn't friendly enough. One adopter even returned him without explanation, simply stating he wasn't a good fit. None of it made sense. How could the same dog be seen in such completely opposite ways? To the shelter staff, Rocky was perfect, fun, loving, and full of life. He had never shown aggression or displayed any odd behaviors, and every time he was returned, he greeted them as if nothing had happened, bouncing with joy, as if happy to be back. But why did so many families struggle to keep him? Determined to solve the mystery, a young volunteer named Emma decided to take matters into her own hands. She had been helping at the shelter for months and had always adored Rocky. She loved playing with him, watching him zoom around the yard and laughing at his goofy antics. She simply couldn't believe that such a lovable dog could be anything but a delight to have at home. So she came up with a plan. "I'll take him home. For the night," she suggested to the shelter director. "Maybe if I see him outside the shelter, I'll understand what's going on." It seemed like the perfect idea. That evening, Emma carefully placed an excited Rocky into his carrier and carried him to her car. As she drove home, she glanced at him in the rearview mirror. His tail was wagging so fast, his entire body seemed to vibrate with excitement. "You're just happy to go for a ride, aren't you?" she chuckled. Rocky let out a happy bark in response, but despite her confidence in him, Emma felt a twinge of nervousness. What if there really was something wrong with Rocky? What if, away from the shelter, he became a completely different dog? Had all those families been right after all? When she arrived home, she decided to take things slow. She gently placed the carrier on the floor, opened the door, and stepped back. She wanted Rocky to explore at his own pace without any pressure. Instead of hovering, she busied herself tending to her other pets, her old Labrador, Charlie, and her cat, Lizzie, while keeping an eye on Rocky from a distance. At first he was cautious, sniffing the air and twitching his ears as he took in the unfamiliar surroundings. Slowly, he stepped out of the carrier, pausing now and then to glance around. But after a few minutes, his hesitation vanished, replaced by his usual high-energy excitement. Sorry to interrupt, but before we continue, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us out. Thank you so much. Suddenly, Rocky was dashing around the room, his paws tapping against the floor as he sniffed furniture, leapt onto cushions, and barked happily at nothing in particular. Emma smiled as she watched him. This was the Rocky she knew, joyful, energetic, and full of life. Everything seemed perfectly normal. She let out a relieved sigh. Maybe those families had simply misunderstood him. Maybe they weren't prepared for a dog with his level of enthusiasm. Perhaps they had expected a quiet lapdog and were instead met with a whirlwind of energy. For now, though, everything seemed fine. Rocky was in his element, tail wagging, running in circles, and having the time of his life. Emma kept watching, still determined to figure out what had gone wrong in his previous homes. She just hoped that by the end of the night she would have her answer. By the end of the night, Emma hoped she would have an answer. Luckily, morning arrived without incident, and as golden rays of sunlight filtered through her curtains, she couldn't shake the feeling that today would be crucial for Rocky. She had spent the night reflecting on his behavior, replaying every moment in her mind, trying to piece together why such a lovable dog kept being returned time and time again. Determined to uncover the truth, Emma quickly got ready and set off for work. The car ride was quiet, with Rocky curled up in the passenger seat, his tail flicking lazily. He had no idea that today would change everything, that the secrets of his past were finally about to be revealed. When she arrived at the shelter, the first thing she did was pull up Rocky's file. As she skimmed through the list of his previous owners, curiosity washed over her. There had to be a pattern, a common thread that explained why every one of these families had ultimately decided they couldn't keep him. Taking a deep breath, Emma started dialing the numbers one by one. Some calls went unanswered, but others picked up, and soon a pattern began to emerge. Every home Rocky had lived in had one crucial similarity. They all had other pets. The realization hit Emma like a lightning bolt, an undeniable pattern that had gone unnoticed until now. Determined to confirm her suspicions, she pressed on, speaking to as many of Rocky's former owners as she could reach. As she listened, the pieces of the puzzle began falling into place. One family hesitated before finally admitting with a heavy sigh that Rocky had attacked their elderly dog multiple times, completely unprovoked. At first, they thought it was just excitement, assuming he needed time to adjust. But the incidents continued growing more severe until they realized that no amount of patience or training could curb his aggression toward their older pet. Heartbroken, they had no choice but to bring him back. Another adopter, sounding just as regretful, revealed that Rocky had relentlessly chased their two cats, never giving them a moment of peace. What started as playful curiosity quickly became something far more alarming. Low growls, snapping jaws, and an unsettling intensity in his eyes whenever the cats were near. Even when separated, Rocky would scratch and bark at the doors, desperate to get to them, as if driven by an instinctive need to eliminate their presence. Fearing for their cat's safety, the family had reluctantly returned him to the shelter. Yet another former owner shared how Rocky had clashed with their existing dog. At first, they held on to hope, believing time would help them coexist. They tried gradual introductions, supervised playtimes, even professional training. But despite their best efforts, the fights grew worse. The tension between the two dogs became unbearable, forcing the family to make the heartbreaking decision to return Rocky. That was it. That was the missing piece of the puzzle. For all of his affectionate and loving nature toward people, Rocky simply did not tolerate other animals. He saw them as a threat, an intrusion into his space. But none of the families had wanted to say outright. They feared that if word got out about his aggression, he might never get adopted again. Or worse, he could be labeled as dangerous and put down. So instead of admitting the real issue, they gave vague excuses and returned him quietly, hoping he would eventually find a home where he truly belonged. Finally, it all made sense. Now that Emma knew the truth, she also knew she had a choice. She could let Rocky go back up for adoption, with the condition that he needed to be the only pet in the home. Or she could try something else, something more difficult but potentially life-changing for Rocky. She could try to train him. Could she teach him to coexist with other animals? Was it even possible? Some dogs, no matter how much effort you put in, simply couldn't change their instincts. Emma knew this all too well. But she wasn't ready to give up on Rocky just yet. Taking a deep breath, she made a plan. She decided to start with something simple, controlled exposure. She allowed Rocky to see her other pets, but only through a safety gate, ensuring they could observe each other without the risk of an attack. Charlie, her old Labrador, wagged his tail curiously, while Lizzie, the cat, sat cautiously on the other side, watching intently. Rocky, however, was furious. He barked aggressively, baring his teeth and lunging at the gate. His small body trembled with frustration, and Emma could see that he still viewed the other animals as intruders. The first few days were tense. Emma had to monitor Rocky constantly, and she started to wonder if this was a losing battle. Maybe he really was meant to be the only pet in a home. But then, something changed. Little by little, Rocky's aggression began to fade. His barking became less frantic, and he no longer threw himself against the gate in frustration. Instead, he started watching the other animals with cautious curiosity. One evening, as Emma was tidying up in the kitchen, she glanced over and saw something that made her heart skip a beat. Lizzie had wandered into the same room as Rocky for the first time, but instead of reacting with anger, no growling, no lunging, Rocky simply observed her. Then, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, he turned back to the ball he had been playing with. It was a breakthrough. Feeling encouraged, Emma decided it was time for the real test. Slowly, she opened the gate and let Charlie walk to the room. The old Labrador padded in calmly, his tail swaying gently. Rocky stiffened, uncertain. His ears twitched, and for a moment, Emma feared he might snap. But then, something incredible happened. Instead of attacking, Rocky cautiously stepped forward and sniffed Charlie. His tail gave a hesitant wag. Charlie sniffed back, and then, as if years of instinct had melted away, Rocky's entire posture changed. His tail wagged faster, his eyes lit up with excitement, and he bounced playfully in front of Charlie, inviting him to chase. Emma held her breath. Charlie responded, nudging Rocky playfully. In an instant, the two dogs were chasing each other around the room, wrestling like old friends. There was no aggression, no tension, just pure, innocent joy. Emma felt a lump rise in her throat. Had she really done it? Had she helped Rocky become the kind of dog who could live peacefully with other animals? As she watched, even Lizzie came forward, giving Rocky a few friendly licks before curling up beside the two dogs. It was a moment of perfect harmony, and Emma had never felt prouder. Soon, it was time for Rocky to return to the shelter and go up for adoption again. But as Emma prepared to say goodbye, she realized something. She didn't want to. Over the weeks they had spent together, Rocky had become part of her family. He had changed, and so had she. She had worked so hard to help him overcome his struggles, and now she couldn't imagine letting him go. And so, she made a life-changing decision. She was going to adopt Rocky herself. He had already found his forever home, right by her side. Sometimes all a dog needs is patience, understanding, and a little love to become the best version of themselves. Rocky had proved that, and Emma knew she had made the right choice. Because in the end, Rocky wasn't just a good dog. He was a great one. Did you enjoy this story? Have you ever adopted an animal that faced challenges at first? How did you handle the situation? Let us know in the comments below. If you like this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Sometimes, all an animal needs is a helping hand, a kind heart to trust, and a safe place to call home. Thank you for listening, and see you in the next video. Have a wonderful day.